Hey everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today we're talking with Jeff Patterson, founder of Northwest Fighting Arts, Portland Tai Chi Academy, and the Yielding Warrior, where he emphasizes the transformative power of meditative and martial arts practices. He's published 2 books and taught thousands of students from around the world. I'm personally super excited about this because, first off, both of my sons actually were in the martial arts and earned black belts in karate, but also because I think meditation is really such an important practice to be doing in our lives. So, with that, welcome, Jeff, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. So, I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk to you about, a lot of things I want to ask you, but I do want to start off a little bit with your background. So, can you just give us a sense of how did you get started in the martial arts and meditation to begin with?
So I started martial arts at a fairly young age. I was in my teens, and as a child, I was always interested in martial arts, but I grew up in a single parent family and we didn't really have any financial means for it. So when I got a job and I was a teenager, I started doing martial arts. And at first, I was very interested in just kind of the thrill and the intensity and the strategy behind it. And then something happened to me when I was 19 where I was going to a boxing gym, and Western boxing was something I was very passionate about. I used to go to the gym 5, 6 days a week. And at this particular gym that I was at, one of the coaches there was a very well-known coach, had created very high-level national and world champion level fighters. However, he had a full card and already had a crew of fighters he was working with, and I didn't really have much of a chance to get to work with him, but I really wanted to. And so I would always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there working with his fighters. I'd work really hard and try to get him to notice me. And after following him around for about 3 or 4 months, he finally started giving me some tips and helping me out a little bit. And it was only 2 or 3 weeks of getting to work with him when he said something to me that changed my life forever. In that he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now, at the time, I'm this 19-year-old kid thinking, isn't Tai Chi for like old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter? Well, I had a lot of respect for this gentleman, and I started doing the practice. And not only has it changed my life in so many ways through the years, I've been very fortunate to see over 26,000 students coming through my academy. And I've heard literally hundreds of stories of how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives. And that's what's given me the energy and the motivation to write my last couple books and create my online programs and really just try to get this word out there.
That's awesome. I'll say so for my sons. Their sort of origin story with martial arts is my wife and I, sort of brought them around all the team sports and had them try them all at a young age because you want them to find something. But one of the things that intuitively, for me, I recognize is when you're in a team sport, there's benefits there for sure. But one of the challenges is that it's a zero sum game in terms of their X amount of minutes that are going to be played, and only certain kids are going to get to play a certain amount or whatever. So, what I liked was the balance between having an individual thing. For me, I was in scouting as a kid. I never did martial arts, but it taught me some like self-reliance. It taught me survival skills, some other things that I thought were really important. They weren't really interested in that, but the thing about putting them into karate that was really awesome is that you're competing against yourself. So you're in a supportive environment where it's totally different than a team sport, and it teaches you all these different things in addition to all the physical benefits because they were getting more flexible, they were getting stronger, they were getting more disciplined, all those other things. And so they both, and we didn't force them to stick with it. And it's funny because my older son took to it right away and he stuck with it and he went all the way through second degree black belt. My younger son, who's 5 years, 4.5 years younger than he is, at first didn't want to do it. And he waited and waited and waited. And then when my older son got his black belt, that's when our younger son was like, "Oh, I want to do it." We said, "Yeah, sure you do. You saw this ceremony, you saw this stuff, and now we're like, no, 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 you got to wait 6 months. If you still want to do it in 6 months from now, we'll let you do it." And he did. And then he did it. And he went all the way through black belt. And I have to say, it was such an awesome experience for them going through that, just from the stuff that they learned about themselves and the commitment and perseverance it takes to achieve at a decent level there. So, but a question that I've got to ask you, and I've been dying to ask you this, is so most people associate martial arts with fighting, right? And like you said, meditation is peaceful. So it kind of seems like the opposite. So what do you see as the connection between the two?
So, a lot of people have that idea, and I talk a lot about yielding in it, which is one of the philosophical concepts in the meditative and martial arts. And when they think of meditation often, or when they think of yielding, and then they relate that to fighting, they think about it's like giving up. And it has nothing to do with giving up. Through meditation, we develop this awareness and this timing and this ability to be present and this ability to get to higher levels of focus that help us in anything we do. And in the meditative arts, there's many different directions or paths that we can go. We can do the athletic side of the training, which is great for any kind of sport you play because it can help your timing and your rhythm and your ability to focus and all of these things that come with that. Then there's the therapeutic side of the practice, which is great for our health and longevity and working through injuries. And then we have the medical side of the practice, which all of Chinese medicine is based off of Qigong theory, and so they're very closely related. And then we have the philosophical side of the practice and also the meditative side of the practice. So as somebody is coming to these arts, they could follow any one of those directions. Now, in the martial sense, you talk about, how are they related? I like to think of it as, you there's an old Chinese saying that says, be as soft as a dove, but as wise as a serpent. And they have been using the idea of yielding in military battles for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it doesn't get more aggressive and more, yang oriented than a military battle, right? And so it has nothing to do with giving up. What it has to do with is that one, your awareness is heightened so you can be strategic on the battles that you choose to fight, but it also allows you to recognize what's going on, not just inside yourself, but in other people, so you can lead them to an area of weakness so it's easier to respond. And in athletics, it's very important because there's nothing you can do about coming up against another athlete, whether it's in basketball or football or fighting, that's twice as strong as you. Those things are going to happen. There's always going to be somebody out there bigger, stronger, and faster than you. And so understanding how to deal with that and having a strategy to implement with this is very powerful.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction. So it reminds me when you're talking about it, it reminds me of the scene in The Matrix when Keanu Reeves sort of starts to see the code, right? Because he's going 100 miles an hour. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but he's going like 100 miles an hour trying to stop all these bots that ultimately are invincible. And when he's trying to do it from that perspective, he has no chance. The minute that he's able to sort of stop and see and just be in the moment and feel sort of the code, all of a sudden he's so much superior to them because now he's operating on a different level. And that's it when you're talking about it, that's the imagery that I'm getting in my head because that's what it seems like. So the three different types of meditation. What is I guess, what would be the key differences between them? I know that there's different sort of focuses of them, but what are the three different types of meditation and what are the main differences there?
Well, first there's many different methods of meditation. What you're referring to on these three different types, just so everybody's clear, is more areas of focus that we can take our meditative practice. So with any meditation practice, you want to have ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practices. Ritual practices, you could have 100 different things that you do. It could be sitting meditation, breath work, standing meditation, a Tai Chi form, a Qigong set, practicing yoga. I mean, there's so many different things that we could do as our ritual practice. And this is something that we want to do every day like we're brushing our teeth. And it doesn't mean that you need to retire to a cave and spend the rest of your life meditating. But if you just did 20 minutes a day of a ritual practice, you could get a lot of benefit from that. Then we have active practices. And active practices, again, there's many of them, but they can be done when you're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store, and they can be done in as little as 60 seconds. And these are important because anytime we start to create a meditation practice in our life, we want to make it a way of life and not a hobby that we do once in a while. You know what? It really makes no sense to sit and meditate every day for 20 minutes. Even if we feel great, then the whole rest of the day you're stressed out and you're worried about everything. And so these active practices help us stay in that present state of mind and that heightened awareness throughout the day. And then thirdly, we have our philosophical practices, and these can be both active practices or ritual-based practices. And using these three foundational principles with your training, when you start building an evolving life practice with the meditative arts, it could give you all of the opportunities that will come with the practice.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love that the thing I think is so important too that you said there is anytime we're trying to develop new habits or we want ways where we can access them that are simple and don't require a tremendous amount of time or energy because especially when we're in the phase of trying to adopt this, it makes it easier to be able to do that. When there's a lot of mental overhead that's involved in anything that we're trying to do, it takes, a separate amount of time, focus, energy, and space to be able to do it. So if we have these little things that we can do in an ongoing way to sort of trigger us back to where we need to be, then I think that's really powerful. So in today's day and age, right, a lot of times everything's focused on do more, work harder, move faster. Meditation seems like, to most people, right, slowing down, doing less. So, how do we balance that? And what would you say to somebody who's like, yeah, I get that, meditation might be useful or whatever, but, I've got so much to do. I just don't have time for that kind of thing.
I'm glad you asked me that because that is one of the most common things I'll hear. A combination of either not having enough time or they've tried meditation before and they just couldn't quiet their mind, it didn't work for them. Between those two things, those are I've heard 1,000 times. And I think I have a good answer for both of those, so I'll give it a swing here. So,
Awesome.
as far as the time thing, the Dalai Lama once said that everybody should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. And I love that saying in that not only does everybody have the time, no matter how busy you are, what I've found and what I've seen firsthand hundreds of times over is that the people that think they're too busy, a lot of the time is because part of a good majority of the day, they're unfocused. And by learning how to get to higher levels of focus, it increases your productivity and it gives you actually more time by integrating these practices into your life. To the second part of that question is people feeling like they're failing because they can't quiet their mind. Somewhere along the way, people got this misguided idea that in order to be successful at meditation, you have to reach this state of nirvana and have nothing else that can distract you or bother you. And, that couldn't be further from the truth. I've been studying the meditative arts now for 36 years. I've traveled around the world for the last 30 years training with meditation teachers all over the planet. And I have never once met anybody who doesn't get distracted. Everybody, I don't care how much of a spiritual leader or advanced meditation practitioner they all get distracted. And when you can change that mindset and realize that you're not failing because you get distracted, then you can look at it from a different perspective and realize that when you understand and see these distractions and we use our posture, our breath, our movement to come back to focus, now we're understanding how to pull ourselves out of these imbalances. And if you meditate 20 minutes every day and you get distracted 50 times, you just got 50 repetitions of bringing yourself back to focus. And if you do this every day, every month, every year, you start to develop this power and this ability to just be unshakable on almost under any circumstance. And so this is one of the ways, one of the many ways how meditation can help improve our focus and improve our lives.
Yeah, I think there's a couple really important things that I want to touch on there because first off, I'm totally with you, by the way, on the too busy. We all have 24 hours in a day. And I don't care how productive we all waste time. It's not a matter of not having the time, it's a matter of not having prioritizing the things that matter enough to do them, right? So if we want to work out, if we want to eat healthy, if we want to, everybody can do it. It's just a
Right.
question of will you prioritize it enough that instead of watching the TV show or doing this or doing that, you're going to do it. And so I'm totally with you there. And I and I love that saying because I do also think that if you're that scattered and you're that running all the time, you probably need it more than the average person. Um, but the other part of what you said that I think is really important is, just in terms of sort of the habit side of it. No matter what it is we do, you learn to ride a bike. The first time that you go to ride a bike, you don't get up, start driving down the block and doing wheelies. You go 2 feet, fall over, skin your knee, you get up and you try it again. I know, like, sometimes when I was a kid and I'd be laying in bed and it was nighttime and my mind was going 100 miles an hour and I was having a hard time sleeping, my parents would say, just lay there, just lay there. You don't have to worry about sleeping. Just lay there. The harder I tried to sleep, the harder it was I couldn't get to sleep. And eventually you get to a point where if you just keep doing it, you can start to quiet your mind and you get better and better and better at it. It takes practice like anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
so, especially if we're going 100 miles an hour all the time, it may be a little bit of an effort to get it going, initially where we can quiet things and get to that state of calm. But totally can be done. It's a matter of repetition, focus, and commitment, right? I mean, so ultimately, we just have to decide that it's important enough to focus on it and do that. Um, so let's talk about performance a little bit in the context of this. How do we unlock optimal performance using meditation?
Well, it's about establishing, daily habits and rituals with the practice. And, with any meditation practice, there are these underlying principles that affect everything we do in life, and they're the foundation of the practice. And I've got these broken down into what I call the five regulations. And by cultivating these five areas, they can help not only with performance, but really anything we do. And they are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And so, briefly, I'll kind of touch on what those are so everybody understands where I'm going with this. Regulating the body is, the easiest one to start with. And as a new practitioner coming to the meditative arts, we always start here because we can see a lot of change in a fairly short amount of time. And what I mean by this is, an example would be think about a time maybe when you're sitting down in front of your computer, your shoulders are rounded forward, you've been there 3 or 4 hours, you're feeling lethargic and depleted, and your energy's just gone. And then think about another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room, your body perks up, and you feel like you're on top of the world. Well, these two different energetic states we're in 100% control of all day, every day. But it's how are we choosing to present ourselves? And so, this idea of how to maintain awareness of our skeletal alignment and our muscular tension in the body is kind of like the basic idea of regulating the body. On a little bit of a deeper level, it's, are we maintaining some kind of muscular structure in the body? Are we keeping our body flexible? Are we eating a healthy diet? Are we getting enough sleep? All of these things are kind of part of that regulating the body. And then we have regulating the breath. Regulating the breath is an extremely deep topic and something that if you take on a meditative practice, you'll be studying for the rest of your life. And there's hundreds of different breathing strategies. And in Qigong, they often refer to Qigong as defining it by the science of the breath. And because of that, we kind of broadly categorize these different breathing strategies into more yin, passive style of meditations, and then yang meditations, which are more energetic and expansive. And an example of a yin breath would be if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so if we want to emulate this inward style of energy with our meditations, we can do longer inhales, soft retentions at the end of the inhale, and shorter exhales to help bring that energy inward, which is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety, dealing with panic attacks, improving your creativity. I mean, there's so many different ways that we could benefit from this. And then we have the yang side of the breath, which is more aggressive. And an example of that would be if you've ever had to push your car, you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is use the exhale, put tension in the breath, make the breath audible. And this helps generate energy, expand it, and make you more powerful. Now, when we start understanding how to use the breath as a strategy, now we can use it to regulate our physical, mental, and emotional outcomes. And in Chinese philosophy, they call this balancing the kan and li, or the water and fire. And it allows us to control these states. You know, everybody goes through the day with emotional ups and downs. Some people are like a roller coaster, others may be a little more balanced. But when you start seeing yourself get excited, we can use the yin side of the breath to help bring it back down. When you see yourself starting to feel depleted, we can do yang exercises to help bring it back up. And so this is very helpful in balancing our states throughout the day. Then the next regulation is regulating the mind. And regulating the mind, again, is a very deep practice and something that you'll spend your entire life's journey on. And we already kind of touched on it a little bit with being distracted when we're meditating. Well, by understanding how to recognize these imbalances, it makes us a lot easier to direct the energy and to find that center, or that place in our minds where we're more present and aware of what's going on with less emotions to distract us. You know, there's a story that I really enjoy about these two old monks, and they're walking down this dirt road after a huge rainstorm. They come up to this big mud puddle, and on the other side of the puddle is this beautiful little girl, and she's standing there in a white dress, and she's crying. And the older of the two monks, he hollers across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." So the older monk, he rolls up his pant legs, he walks across the puddle, he picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side, sets her down, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road, and finally the younger monk is just furious, and he says, "You know we're not supposed to touch girls, but yet you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down and says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we have to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we finally realize maybe we should let that go? And so understanding how to be more in tune with our bodies and our minds and our emotions, we can see these imbalances before they gain too much negative momentum, because it's really hard to change your state when you're extremely emotional and you've been yelling or crying for a long time. But if you get a little bit, maybe somebody bumps into you, and rather than turning around and yelling at them, you say, "Oh, excuse me," it's a lot easier to adjust that and not be in a frustrated state. And so the ability to recognize these imbalances and see them can really save us a lot of heartache. And then the fourth regulation is regulating the energy. And regulating the energy is a very deep topic and something that we could literally talk for hours about. But the basic idea of it is, once you've reached a competent level in regulating the body, the breath, and the mind, you now have the tools to circulate the energy in the body, to lead it inward, to extend it outward, to get different outcomes with some of these meditative practices that we will use. And then lastly, we have regulating the spirit. And regulating the spirit is a very profound idea. It's something that meditation masters and monks will spend their entire life's journey working towards that ultimate stage of enlightenment. And you can see by cultivating these five foundational principles, they can affect anything we do in life. And it's kind of like the bread and butter of the meditative arts.
That is, I mean, that's so profound and fascinating. That's awesome. I mean, just the breath thing alone. I'm thinking about it when you're talking about it. I'm saying, it's so true. Like so many of us, we're doing what we're doing, and it's all sort of unconscious. So whatever our breath happens to be, we're not thinking about it. So, and I've seen the connection between physiology and emotion before. I've heard people reference that where, if you slump your shoulders, you'll feel worse. If you push your shoulders back and puff your chest out, you feel better. But I've never heard it articulated in sort of a full cycle like that and all the different areas. And I think that's so powerful. I can see why it's something that you would have, spent your life studying because I find it fascinating. I really do, and I am a big believer also just in the power of the mind and intention to be able to do things. And I think if we're conscious about that and conscious about our states, I mean, I think about this in the context of everyday things. It's like whether you're driving at the corner and some guy's honking at you because he wanted to go first at the light or whatever. It brings me back to what you're saying in the sense of he's probably not really in control of his own emotion, or he's probably not even conscious of it. It's just a reaction to a stimulus that upset him because he's in a state where he isn't focused and present. And if he had that balance, he'd be able to say, you know what, this isn't that big of a deal, right?
Right.
Let the other guy go. I mean, 5 minutes from now, who's going to care? So I love that. Thank you for the really detailed explanation. That's awesome. So if we want to add meditation to our lives and this isn't something that we're already doing, how do we know what the best type is for us? What is the best way for us to get started with it?
Yeah, so the meditative arts is a very deep topic, and there's so much involved in the practice. I've been studying now for 36 years, and I'm still just a student learning all the time. And through the years as a teacher, one of the most challenging things that comes up is, how do I get somebody who's new to the practice to see the value in it and be consistent enough so they can realize all of the benefits from the practice? And wrestling with this through the years, I've come up with three questions that I always ask new students, that I find that if they really take it to heart and spend some time thinking about these three questions, that their chances of being successful with the practice greatly increase. And the first question is, if you're thinking about starting a meditation practice, or maybe you've tried one before, but it just hasn't become a way of life yet for you, think about why you're being drawn to the practice. Do you want to stay healthy into your later years to watch your grandkids grow up? Are you dealing with a stress disorder or an illness? Do you want to improve your performance on the field? Whatever that is for you, and then don't just stop there. Think about, if I accomplish this and I do stay healthier into my later years, how is that going to benefit me? I'm going to get to play with my grandkids. It's going to feel comfortable walking around the block. I'm going to be able to pick up my groceries. I mean, all of these things that are going to change your life. And then also think about the flip side of that. If I don't do this and I'm frail in my later years and I'm weak, all of the things that you're not going to be able to do. Because if you spend some time truly considering these options, it really gives you the fuel and the energy to be like, I got to do this practice. You know, you have a reason behind it. And that's very helpful because I don't care who you are, if it's not tomorrow, next week, or next month, your alarm's going to go off in the morning and you're going to be, I'll just hit the snooze button. I'll do it tomorrow. And we got to get beyond that and think this is the way that we do things. And, you know, I wouldn't imagine too many people out there miss brushing their teeth in the morning. It's just like that. Once you get into the habit and you realize the benefits, you just do it. You know, it's part of who you are. And that kind of leads into the second thing that you want to be aware of when starting a practice like this is that you need to approach it with the understanding that you need to be consistent. You need to make the commitment to do a little bit every day, to have a ritual practice, even if it's only 20 minutes, to integrate some of these active practices throughout the day and be consistent with that. And through that, you gain this discipline and this integrity and this perseverance that not only affects your practice, but it affects everything you do in life. And so you reap many benefits from that. And then the third thing, and this is very important because there are so many distractions out there, is that you need to find a guide and somebody to help you so you can get where you want to go on the shortest path. There is literally a million videos out there on YouTube, and I don't know how many apps that you could find and buy. And if you think that you're going to be self-taught and go look at some of these things, you're going to waste 10, 15, 20 years of your life and never get deeper than the surface of the practice. Having somebody point you in the right direction can save you years of time and get you the benefits you want to see a lot quicker. You know, I've literally had students come into my academy who have been self-taught and they've been training 15 plus years. They'll come in here and see somebody who's been following a guide and only been here 6, 12 months, and they're further along in their practice. And, you know, life is short, your time is valuable. It's worth it to find somebody to help you and give you the shortcuts and show you how to get where you want to go. And so if you think about those three things and really put some honest effort and thought there, your chances of being successful with the practice are going to greatly increase.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge believer in having a mentor. I think, look, there's a value on other people's experience. I know, when I was in college, I was a javelin thrower, and the first couple of years there, I didn't have a dedicated coach. We had a number of coaches, but nobody was specific to that event. And my junior year, we brought in a guy who was specific to throwing events, and in particular javelin. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. He made a couple of tweaks to my form, and I had the best year that I ever had. And I had been studying it. I had done videos of myself in order to like break down my own form and all this other stuff. But you can't replicate or replace the value that somebody else can give you if they already have that experience, the track record. They've done all the hard work for you already. They can give you shortcuts and distinctions that would take you forever to figure out on your own. And so I'm sure, as you say, exactly the same idea, right? If you get somebody who's experienced, skilled, knows what they're doing, you're going to get a lot more out of it a lot faster. And I think that that's a really important point. Um, so let's talk about yielding. I know we spoke about this a little bit at the beginning. What specifically is it? How is it useful? And I know that it sounds like a paradox, but what is your yielding warrior program? Because one would think that the yielding warrior, like you said before, sounds like somebody who's weak and running from battle, but obviously that's not what it is. So, can you give us a sense?
Yeah, so yielding is one of the many philosophical concepts in the meditative and martial arts. It's something I've been passionate about for a while because it's so strategic. You know, in my most recent book, The Yielding Warrior, I break down yielding into three categories. We have physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force, and now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. Now, in athletics, it's easy to see how this is beneficial because, like we mentioned earlier, there's going to be people bigger and stronger than you when you come up into any kind of physical event. Well, in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, while it may be a lifetime journey to really master these skills, from day one, by integrating a meditation practice into your life, you start to see these things inside yourself with more clarity and more awareness. And this is where it becomes very interesting because now, not only do we see those things inside of ourselves more clearly, we also start to see them more clearly in other people. And this is where we start moving into what I call mental yielding. So, say, for example, you and I are having a conversation, and I say something that unsettles you, and I pick up on it right from that first sign of imbalance. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention to that, and pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to slap me upside the head. And so, learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions is extremely powerful. One, you're just being more considerate, which is something that we could all do more of. And two, it allows you to be strategic in your interactions so you can lead the conversation to a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance. And this is beneficial in your relationships and business and sales and negotiations. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can apply this concept. And then the third area of yielding is emotional yielding. And emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but with our own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about oftentimes something will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path and we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But by integrating a meditation practice into our life, we're able to stay more balanced and more present and let the emotions kind of fade and be a little bit more focused. Now, when these things happen, rather than approaching them from an emotional standpoint, we can be more centered and oftentimes make a more educated choice that's going to save us a lot of heartache on the other side. And I've been explaining this idea of yielding now for many years. I've been running this academy here for 30 years, and one of the most common things I'll hear people say is, yielding makes a lot of sense. In fact, I use yielding all the time. Well, I would agree, and I think everybody does some degree of yielding all the time, but it's kind of like, if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, I guarantee you that person would see things about the series of events and the timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And the meditative arts helps us see things inside of ourselves and inside of other people that I truly believe most people will go through life and never have any clue of unless they have this kind of a practice in their life.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with that. I think, even when it comes to just conversation, as you mentioned, right? Not only I've had a lot of conversations with people where, and I'm sure I'm guilty of it too, where not only was I not aware of how they were receiving what I was saying, but somebody once coined the phrase. They said people oftentimes in a conversation listen with intent to respond instead of intent to understand. And so when you do that, you're already dismissing everything the other person's saying because all you're doing is waiting for your turn to talk. And there's a profound difference even in active listening that happens when you change that. and you fully absorb what somebody else is saying and then think about that and then respond based on. So I can totally agree with you that there's no question that a lot of people go through life and probably are completely oblivious, don't have any even concept of those ideas, let alone an awareness of doing it. So that's, I mean, yeah, that 100%. So the Yielding Warrior program, what is that, and how is that different from other meditation programs?
So the Yielding Warrior program is an online program that teaches people how to integrate the meditative arts. It teaches them the science behind the practice so they can create ritual, active, and philosophical practices, integrate them into their life, but understand, are they wanting to do this path or this path or this path? So they pick the right things that will help them down those directions, because there's so many different things out there. If you don't have a focus or an understanding of what they're for, you really can get lost. And so this gives you the ability to kind of write your own prescription, if you will, and pick practices that will help you accomplish what you're trying to do. So, if you're somebody dealing with panic attacks, you'll pick practices that are helpful for that. If you're somebody wanting to improve your performance on the field, now we're doing more focus techniques and things to help us expand our awareness. And so you have that understanding and that idea. So that's kind of what the program's all about. Also on that platform, we have a teacher training program up there. So if anybody is interested in learning how to hand down these arts and help us spread the word of how amazing they are, then there's that avenue as well.
Awesome. So where can people find you? Where can people find the program? Where can people connect with you?
TheYieldingWarrior.com is the website. If you go to TheYieldingWarrior.com/book, I'll send you out a free copy of my most recent book. Just pay for shipping and handling. You can also check out our teacher training program up there. And then all of the basic social handles, they're all The Yielding Warrior. You can find me that way pretty easy.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for that. So I have one last question to ask because I think it's important and I love to hear what everybody's going to say. And that is, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
A long time ago, one of my teachers told me that you want to create a life and not make a living. And if if everybody would follow that and follow their passion and create the life that they want to make rather than thinking about what they've got to do to earn a living, I think that people would be a lot happier and a lot more productive in what they do in their career.
It's awesome. Great advice. Yeah, we always tell our kids as they're, growing in each stage, follow your passion, do something that you love, worry about the money you're going to make or all the others after. But if you're doing something that you love, it doesn't feel like work anyway. You enjoy what you're doing, and you're much more likely to be successful because it comes from a place of passion and desire as opposed to something that you think was going to get you somewhere or give you something that you wanted to have. And so I love that advice. I think it's great. So with that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again so much, Jeff, for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Visit theyieldingwarrior.com/book to get a free copy of his book, The Yielding Warrior, Discovering the Secret Path to Unleashing Your True Potential. It teaches you how to use the concept of yielding in every area of your life. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And remember, no matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.